Hey, level casters. Today's lesson takes us to a truly historic moment, a time when a symbol of division crumbled, bringing hope and freedom to millions. We're going to explore the fall of the Berlin Wall, not just what happened, but why it was so important and what it meant for the world. Imagine a city split in two, families separated, and a concrete barrier standing as a harsh reminder of political differences. For nearly 3 decades, that was the reality for Berlin. This wall, built almost overnight in 1961, wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a powerful symbol of the Cold War, the intense rivalry between the United States and its allies, the West, and the Soviet Union and its allies, the East. People in East Berlin, under Soviet influence, lived in a different world from their neighbors in West Berlin, who were supported by Western powers. The West offered more freedom and economic opportunities, while the East was more controlled by the government. This difference created a lot of tension and a desire for change among many in the East. Life in East Germany, officially known as the German Democratic Republic, GDR, was very different from West Germany. The government controlled almost everything: what people could buy, where they could work, and even what they could say. There was a secret police force, the Stasi, that watched citizens closely, making many people feel afraid to express their true opinions. Travel to Western countries was almost impossible for ordinary citizens. The Berlin Wall became the most visible sign of this division, a physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain that separated Eastern and Western Europe. For years, people tried to escape from east to west, some successfully, others tragically losing their lives in the attempt. The wall was heavily guarded, with watchtowers, armed soldiers, and even minefields in some areas, making escape incredibly dangerous. But even with all these dangers, the desire for freedom never faded. People dreamed of a day when the wall would no longer stand, when they could reunite with family and friends, and when they could choose their own path in life. This dream, though seemingly impossible for many years, slowly started to gather strength, fueled by small acts of defiance and a growing sense of unrest throughout Eastern Europe. The stage was set for an incredible change, a moment that would surprise the world and redefine the future. The late 1980s saw a wave of change sweeping across Eastern Europe. The Soviet Union, under its new leader Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced new policies called glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. These policies aimed to make the Soviet system more transparent and efficient, but they also unintentionally opened the door for more freedom and criticism within Soviet-controlled countries. People in countries like Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia began to demand more rights and less government control. There were large protests and demonstrations, and governments that had been in power for decades started to lose their grip. In East Germany, people were closely watching these events. They saw that other countries were changing, and they wondered if their own government would also allow more freedom. Many East Germans were tired of the restrictions on their lives, the lack of consumer goods, and the inability to travel freely. The economic situation in East Germany was also getting worse compared to the booming West. More and more people wanted to leave, seeking a better life. In the summer of 1989, things really started to heat up. Hungary, a Soviet bloc country, opened its border with Austria, a Western country. This was a huge deal. Thousands of East Germans, who were on holiday in Hungary, seized this opportunity. They packed their bags and crossed into Austria, then made their way to West Germany. This created a mass exodus, a large number of people leaving the country, which put immense pressure on the East German government. Other East Germans sought refuge in West German embassies in countries like Czechoslovakia and Poland, hoping to gain passage to the West. The images of these people, climbing over fences and camping in embassy gardens, were broadcast around the world, showing the desperate desire for freedom. Back in East Germany, large-scale protests, known as Monday demonstrations, began in cities like Leipzig and Dresden. Thousands of people marched peacefully, chanting, "Wir sind das Volk." We are the people, demanding free elections, freedom to travel, and an end to the Communist Party's rule. The government was faced with a difficult choice: use force to stop the protests, which could lead to bloodshed and international condemnation, or give in to the demands. The world watched with bated breath, wondering what would happen next. The pressure was building, both from within East Germany and from the international community. The time for change was clearly approaching. The evening of November 9, 1989, started like any other for most people in Berlin. However, behind the scenes, the East German government was trying to manage the growing crisis. They knew they had to do something about the increasing number of people leaving the country and the widespread protests. So, they drafted new travel regulations that would allow East Germans to apply for visas to travel abroad, but only under certain conditions and with approval. The plan was to announce these new rules carefully, giving people the impression that travel was becoming easier, but still maintaining some control. However, a government spokesperson named Günter Schabowski was given the task of announcing these new regulations at a press conference. He had not been fully briefed on all the details and was handed a note with the new rules just before the conference began. During the press conference, a journalist asked when these new travel regulations would come into effect. Schabowski, seemingly confused and without fully reading the note, looked at his paper and famously said, "As far as I know, it takes effect immediately, without delay." This statement was a complete misunderstanding of the actual plan, which was to implement the changes the next day, after further details were worked out. But the words were out. Live on television, the world heard Schabowski declare that the border was open. People in East Berlin couldn't believe their ears. Was it true? Could they really cross? The news spread like wildfire. Radio and television stations in West Berlin immediately reported the announcement, and word quickly reached East Berliners. At first, there was disbelief, then cautious excitement. People started to gather at the various checkpoints along the Berlin Wall, unsure of what would happen. They approached the border guards, who were just as confused as the citizens. The guards had not received any official orders to open the gates, immediately, without delay. They tried to contact their superiors, but the situation was chaotic. More and more people arrived, creating a massive crowd. The atmosphere was incredibly tense but also filled with a growing sense of hope. The guards, outnumbered and without clear instructions, faced an impossible situation. They could use force, which would lead to a terrible tragedy, or they could let the people through. Finally, at around 10:45 p.m., overwhelmed by the sheer number of people and the emotional weight of the moment, the border guards at the Bornholmer Street checkpoint made a decision. They opened the gates. The moment the gates opened at Bornholmer Street was electrifying. It wasn't just a single gate. Within hours, other checkpoints followed suit, and the Berlin Wall, a symbol of oppression for so long, was effectively open. Thousands of East Berliners poured into West Berlin, many for the very first time. The scenes that followed were unforgettable. People hugged strangers, cried tears of joy, and danced on top of the wall. West Berliners welcomed their Eastern neighbors with open arms, offering them flowers, champagne, and even small amounts of welcome money. The atmosphere was one of pure euphoria and celebration. People used hammers and chisels to chip away at the wall, taking pieces as souvenirs. These Mauerspekt, wall peckers, literally began to dismantle the physical barrier that had divided their city and their lives for so long. The fall of the Berlin Wall was not just a local event, it had massive global implications. It signaled the beginning of the end of the Cold War. The collapse of the communist regime in East Germany quickly led to similar changes in other Eastern European countries. Less than a year later, on October 3, 1990, Germany was officially reunified, bringing East and West Germany back together as one nation. This was a complex process, with many challenges, but it marked the end of a divided Germany. The fall of the Berlin Wall reminded the world that people's desire for freedom and human rights can overcome even the strongest barriers. It showed the power of peaceful protest and the unexpected ways in which historical change can happen. Today, only small sections of the Berlin Wall remain standing, preserved as memorials and art galleries, reminding us of the past. The East Side Gallery, for example, features murals painted directly on a long section of the wall, many of which reflect on the themes of freedom, hope, and political change. These remnants serve as a powerful reminder of a dark period in history and the triumph of the human spirit. The event fundamentally reshaped Europe and the world, proving that even the most formidable symbols of division can eventually fall. It was a victory for freedom, democracy, and the human spirit, a moment etched forever in the annals of history.
That was an amazing story.
Yes, the fall of the Berlin Wall is truly inspiring.
I can't imagine living with a wall like that.
It must have been very difficult.
So it really fell because of a mistake?
Yes, a misunderstanding at a press conference.
That's incredible. A small error changed history.
It was the spark, but the pressure was building.
The Monday demonstrations were very important.
People wanted freedom and change.
And Hungary opening its border helped a lot.
It allowed many East Germans to leave.
The Stasi must have been a scary presence.
Yes, the secret police watched everyone.
I didn't know about glasnost and perestroika.
Gorbachev's reforms helped loosen control.
It's good that it was mostly peaceful.
It was a triumph for peaceful protest.
Germany reunified quickly after the wall fell.
Less than a year later, in 1990.
What a powerful symbol of hope.
It truly was. Keep learning, Levelcasters.
That's all for today. Keep it up, and we'll see you in the next Levelcast lesson.